On March 14, 2025, Mark Carney became Canada's 24th Prime Minister, stepping in at a moment of economic uncertainty. Inflation was rising, energy prices were volatile, and trade tensions with the US were escalating. Within the first 6 months of his time as Prime Minister, Carney has won an election that seemed previously unwinnable, passed controversial legislation around nation-building projects and immigration, changed or removed a number of taxes, and proposed a bold new economic vision for the country that, so far, has most Canadians on board. In this video, we look at Mark Carney's first 150 days in office. Have they been a success? Who has he shown himself to be? And where might he go from here? Carney's early moves showed his practicality and refusal to act in political theater. He appointed several hated veteran ministers, such as Chrystia Freeland, Dominic LeBlanc, and Sean Fraser, to new cabinet positions, prioritizing their experience over the public perception of them. Carney's first act as Prime Minister was symbolic and practical. He eliminated the consumer carbon tax, promising immediate relief to Canadians struggling to make ends meet. This move set the tone for a cost of living first agenda. It drew applause from households and small businesses, while environmental groups and opposition MPs accused him of gutting climate change policy on day one. It was a calculated risk, signaling that he was willing to take political heat on climate change if it meant winning public approval on the economy. In response to escalating US trade tensions and domestic economic challenges, Carney's government rolled out a series of economic interventions to stabilize the situation. They waived employment insurance waiting periods to get support to workers faster. It deferred corporate tax cuts and GST or HST payments to free up liquidity for businesses, and launched infrastructure funding initiatives aimed at stimulating job creation and economic growth. He also delivered on a number of campaign promises, eliminating the goods and services tax for first-time homebuyers purchasing new or substantially renovated homes valued up to $1.5 million. This policy, effective immediately, was projected to save buyers up to $50,000, with the goal of addressing housing affordability and stimulating construction. Additionally, Carney's government implemented a middle-class tax cut, providing tax relief for nearly 22 million Canadians and saving families up to $840 annually. A measure introduced as part of a broader economic strategy to support households amid rising costs and to stimulate consumer spending. On June 6, 2025, Carney introduced the One Canadian Economy Act, or Bill C-5, designed to reduce interprovincial trade barriers and streamline regulatory approvals for major projects. Bill C-5 aimed to encourage economic integration across Canada, enhance labor mobility, and facilitate the rapid approval of nationally significant infrastructure. The bill has been controversial, giving the government power to potentially override provincial or municipal authority in order to get projects built. It also received a lot of pushback from Indigenous groups who felt that the government was ignoring their sovereignty. The bill was amended to require Indigenous consultation, but still doesn't sit well with many environmentalists and Indigenous rights groups. On the immigration front, Carney's administration initiated a significant policy shift. In May 2025, the government announced a reduction in annual permanent resident admissions, setting targets at 395,000 for 2025, 380,000 for 2026, and 365,000 for 2027. The goal is to stabilize population growth and ease pressure on housing, healthcare, and social services. The policy also included caps on temporary residence and a focus on attracting skilled immigrants to meet economic needs. The government passed Bill C-2, which makes a number of changes to immigration, notably significantly restricting asylum seekers who can enter and remain in the country. The bill also introduced a number of surveillance measures that have been widely criticized. Although these measures are intended to crack down on terrorism and illegal border crossings, they give the government increased power to access individuals' personal and private information, which has been met with criticism. On the energy and environmental policy front, Carney has expressed support for major energy projects. In July 2025, he indicated strong federal support for a new West Coast oil pipeline, highlighting its potential as a nation-building project and suggesting it would likely proceed under the newly passed Bill C-5. That same month, Carney expressed backing for a proposed $16.5 billion carbon capture and storage project in Alberta's oil sands, viewing it as complementary to the West Coast pipeline. The federal government also reaffirmed its commitment to their EV mandate, requiring 20% of new vehicle sales to be zero emission by 2026 and reaching 100% by 2035. However, cutting the carbon tax and auto tariffs have likely made EV mandates impossible to reach, and the government has yet to roll out any kind of coherent strategy on how they will meet those targets, considering how the market has changed in recent months. So far, Carney has seemed to prioritize economic investment over climate policy. Although his government continues to be in favor of various emission reduction policies, they generally do not have tangible plans on how they'll reach these targets, making them more of nice ideas than actual plans. One of Carney's biggest challenges and potentially biggest failures thus far has been managing the relationship with the US. While he has potentially been put into an impossible situation, Canada and the US have still failed to reach a trade agreement, despite an August 1st deadline and an agreement between the US and the EU, and reportedly talks between Carney and Trump are few and far between. However, the government has diversified our trade partners, created a closer relationship with Europe, and taken other steps to reduce Canada's dependency on trade. Carney has made several concessions for Trump that have been controversial, first suspending the digital services tax and more recently canceling reciprocal tariffs on goods covered under CUSMA. Neither of these concessions have led to an agreement with the states, leading to some commenting that Carney's elbows are both up and down at the same time. Another way Carney's government is responding to a changing relationship with the US is to rearm the country, although that is also potentially a step to appease the US as Canada works to hit defense spending targets dictated by NATO. The government plans to spend an additional $9 billion on defense in 2025-26, slowly increasing to 5% of Canada's GDP by 2035. To pay for this, Carney initially said on the campaign trail that he would find inefficiencies in the government and solve them with technology. But the reality is that the government is planning sweeping cuts to the public service in order to save money. There are legitimate concerns the public service is bloated and inefficient, but this will result in the loss of previously good, safe jobs for many Canadians. While Carney's early moves appear focused on stabilizing the economy and easing public concerns, some analysts suggest a deeper strategic layer. Bill C-5 and C-2 serve to consolidate federal power, shape interprovincial trade narratives, and set the groundwork for long-term economic realignment. In a sense, the first 150 days are not just about immediate relief, they're quietly reshaping Canada's political and economic structure. Many of these policies, as has been widely written about, feel like they have been taken directly from the playbook of a Stephen Harper-era conservative. One writer called Carney not a progressive conservative, but a conservative progressive. And despite the intense divide along partisan lines, Carney, who wears the stripes of a liberal but is governing more like a conservative, has managed to remain quite popular. In early June, just under 3 months into his premiership, Abacus data found that 52% of Canadians felt the new government was off to a good start, with only 28% disagreeing. By mid-June, Carney's approval ratings peaked at 67%, the highest early performance of any Canadian Prime Minister in recent decades, surpassing even Justin Trudeau's post-2015 election highs. Through the summer, enthusiasm began to cool, though support remained solid. And by August, Abacus data recorded Carney's approval at 50%, down just 2 points from late July. Still, despite growing economic fatigue, the majority of Canadians support Carney's leadership. One striking poll conducted shortly after the election found that in Alberta, the country's strongest conservative region, voters were nearly as impressed with Carney as they were with Poilievre, the difference being 1%. Part of Carney's strong polling is that he's managed to accomplish something that seemed nearly impossible mere months ago, which is to impress both Liberal and Conservative voters. Collectively, these numbers suggest strong early momentum and that Carney's bold early actions have earned him broad public goodwill. His early approval ratings reflect a genuine level of trust in his leadership by Canadians. Whether that confidence will endure as domestic and international challenges deepen remains to be seen. If Carney cannot bring down the cost of living, negotiate a new trade deal with the US, and deliver on nation-building projects that create a stronger economy, public sentiment will likely rapidly turn on him. The actions of his first 150 days were about promises. The next 150 will have to be about results.